Dr. Hannick, let me ask you a question first. Talked about we're seeing increased issues with wells in rural areas. What are the alternatives?
It's a good question, which means the answer is difficult. So I think some wells are probably too shallow to refill, even if the rains return, just given the amount of pumping that has been occurring in some areas. Some of these wells are also in what's called fractured rock systems, so it's not automatic that you just dig a bit deeper and you're gonna find water again. So the solutions, I think, one of the measures in SB 88, in addition to improving water information, was also enabling consolidation of systems in cases where that seemed like the best alternative. So that gives the State Water Board the authority to do that, and it also importantly relieves the larger agency that would take on and connect some smaller folks to smaller systems and individuals to that system to take on. It takes care of the liability that they might face in relation to risks of water quality or other issues for those systems. I think that's going to be an important step going forward for a lot of the water issues in small rural communities, which it's important to remember are not just that the wells are dry right now, but in a lot of these places there are also water quality issues that make that water unsafe. And then I think looking at the potential for technology in some of these places for remote treatment of the water quality issues, and in some places digging deeper wells, finding sustainable funding sources for the operations and management aspects of this is a key challenge still. And we could imagine, in the context of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, that as part of a basin management plan, there's a small amount paid by everybody who pumps that goes into a mitigation fund to deal with some of those problems.
Dr. Dimpa, I think I've read that average Sierra temperature last winter was 32 degrees. And if we are in an era where with higher temperature, we will have less snowpack. And we've built an entire water delivery system based on snowpack. And this may be a question for others later, but are you aware of any folks thinking about what we're going to do to capture that rainwater rather than snow?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there are speakers with deep expertise in this question on the agenda today. Excuse me. From the climate perspective, I can say that we do have high confidence that we're in an era of increased risk of the kind of year that we had this year in terms of temperature, and what that means is that the water infrastructure, the management decisions that we have in place that were designed in an older climate, that those are not necessarily going to be optimal for the climate that we have now, and certainly with liquid precipitation versus snow, as well as the melting of snow. What to do about that is a question for others, but certainly from a climate perspective, I think we do have high confidence that we can expect it more frequently, and that continuing to rely on snow for the flood control that it has offered historically, and the water storage that it has offered historically is not going to be a reliable expectation.
In California, we've made great policy strides and practical strides around trying to take a look at how we as a state reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. We're a really small blip in the world scheme of things when we look at greenhouse gas emissions, and as a climatologist, you look at this and are we years away from seeing any significant change in climate and in temperature because we're so far down the course of having greenhouse gas emissions impacting our atmospheres?
Well, we do know that global warming has already happened, and we know that we're already experiencing effects of that global warming. So just that acknowledgement alone implies that we have some adaptation to do. And I think this drought highlights a lot of the areas where we have opportunities, as we've heard today. In terms of the future, California has been a leader and can continue to be a leader in experimenting and demonstrating solutions. And this is certainly a global scale challenge. We know that stabilizing the climate system at any level essentially requires net zero emissions. This is a fundamental feature of the physical energy balance of planet Earth. And that's a global scale challenge, and California has been a leader in finding innovations, and I think we can continue to be a leader not only on the adaptation and resilience side of those innovations, but also in terms of the mitigation side and how they interact.
Let me thank both of you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to take a brief pause to remind folks that there is a Twitter account set up for this hearing, and it's an opportunity for a conversation outside of the hearing room. And if you wanted to participate through Twitter, it's hashtag ASM Drought. We are now going to turn to state agencies to talk a little bit about initiatives to manage water resources. And we start with Secretary John Laird, California Natural Resources Agency Secretary. We've also got Mark Cowan, who is the Director of the California Department of Water Resources, and from the State Water Resources Control Board, the Chief Deputy Director, Jonathan Bishop. And Mr. Laird, welcome. And I would just note that everyone who has testified so far at this hearing has a PhD. And I just want to assure the public that you are a very intelligent man, and we look forward to your comments.
If I'm so intelligent, how come I sat where you sat?
Why ask me?
But let me do a couple of things first. First, since I've been in the hearing room, the governor's office announced Mr. Chairman's reappointment to the Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission, so I wanted to congratulate you on your reappointment and let everybody know. And Noah Diefenbaugh, who just spoke, invoked Lake Woebegone, where all the kids are above average. And he attended Mount Madonna School in Santa Cruz County and did his grad work in climate change at UC Santa Cruz, where all kids are above average. And so I wanted to acknowledge both of those. And I paraphrase him frequently because the work that he just presented to you is the perfect push-off point for sort of the more global view that I want to do in starting this panel. And it's that he talks, and he got right up to it in what he just said about documenting how the climate has changed, in saying California, in essence, is moving from one climate to another, and our infrastructure was designed for a climate that isn't really here or isn't going to be here in the same way. And that is very challenging. And what it does is it presents us with not just the issue of trying to see if there's any extra water that can be divined from a system, but how we basically stabilize or make sustainable what we have, which are incredible challenges. And last week, I spoke at the Economic Summit in Ontario, And they had 3 goals, and they were all keyed to 1 million. And one of the goals was, how do we create 1 million more acre-feet of water? And in speaking to that there, it was clear that a number of people in the audience thought that meant, oh, we just figure out how to do storage that's above ground. We get 1 million acre-feet. That is how we march there. And yet, the California Water Action Plan is really an all-of-the-above menu, and it's really going to take all of the above with stabilization of the current water system to even imagine getting to that goal. And for the uninitiated, what the California Water Action Plan is, and almost 2 years ago it was the Secretaries of EPA, Agriculture, and myself, and we took all the existing state plans and state statutory authorities from the legislature and the governor and wrapped them into one plan for what we have to do on water and tried to set short-term goals for achievement in the next 5 years. And it really is conservation as a way of life, more storage, effective groundwater management, remediation of certain places, wetlands restoration, recycling, stormwater capture. There are just many things that fall into that, and we have to do it all. And the bond that the legislature approved, that with only 2 dissenting votes in the entire legislature, and went to the voters, and they approved by 2/3, really was keyed to that all of the above strategy. And it also includes integrated regional watershed management, which in many ways is trying to maximize whatever water opportunities you have closer to home. And I think that the real thing that is the difficulty in, as you look for alternatives and you look from the global position, is everything is not easy. There is almost something that is tied to it somewhere else in the water system, no matter how you do it. And if you look at water recycling, that is a great opportunity. We need to pursue it. But it really relies on the fact that there's some underlying reliable water source to be able to do. And in those places where it might be environmentally okay to do desalting, and some people wish to use sewer outfalls in coastal jurisdictions as a way to dispose of the brine by mixing it with the wastewater and returning it to the ocean in roughly the same salinity from which it was taken, you then have to choose. If you're using the recycling water that you might use to recycle to dispose of the brine, it's one or the other. What do you do? So you have to have a reliable source, or it's what is same with conservation. For conservation to work, you have to have an underlying reliable water supply. There is growing desire to have stormwater recapture, and particularly in Southern California. And if there's going to be stormwater recapture, you can't be in a drought all the time. That does not make it necessarily reliable. But secondly, if you have to store it somewhere, many of the places that most present themselves in Southern California are aquifers that need to be remediated. And so you can't just talk immediately about doing the stormwater unless as part of your long-term plan you have remediation of the aquifers, so you have a place to store it. There are many people that say, look at the last wet year that we had, which is right at the beginning of this administration, and point out that in the Delta, after the water was taken under contracts and environmental protections for supply, after water was released for whatever environmental or salinity uses that needed to do, there was 700,000 to 800,000 acre-feet of additional water that might have been available, but there is no conveyance or capture mechanism there to allow it. So you talk about storage south of Delta. If it is off the Delta, it can't be done very well or at all in the current configuration. So really, it is trying to look at all these issues and realize that they are connected to each other, and that when you talk about trying to develop water from different things, you have to have something else that almost goes with it in every place. And I think the toughest thing for the public is, and we have seen it in the drought, where if people are overwhelmingly successful at conserving, and water rates are tied to water use, the revenues to the water systems go down when the fixed costs didn't. And so in some places, people see costs go up and think they conserved and they did a great job, and yet the fixed costs are the same. And it is very confusing. And that is true in a changing climate to a water system where you might have to invest more to just stabilize exactly what you have. And it flies in the face of the public's general view that if you pay more, you should get more, as opposed to you might have to pay more to get what you get now, as opposed to if the system collapses because there's no investment, you might have to pay more to get a lot less. And that is a very hard concept to explain to the rate-paying public in a way that they get it. And so I think what we're trying to do is follow up in every way on the bond, on the water action plan. And we also face the fact that there's over 430 municipal systems in the state. And in many ways, it's the municipal systems that drive the investment, that a lot of the grants go to the municipal systems. It's not state investment. When I was in the legislature, one of the things that would make me crazy is debates on the assembly floor where an assembly member would say, we haven't built a dam in California in over 40 years. And I would always stand up and say, yeah, because we only built one in all history, and it was just over 40 years ago. It's because most storage outside of the federal Central Valley Project is done by locals. And there's at least one national figure right now that says there's been no storage and attributed to political motives, and yet there have been 2 Lake Shastas worth of water developed in storage in the last generation, and it's because it's in Los Vaqueros, or it's Pyramid Lake, or it's the lake in the reservoir in San Diego where they lifted the dam. It is going on with local investment, or the water bank, the Kern Water Bank. All those things are moving ahead with storage, and they did not rely, most of them in any way, in state assistance to make it happen. And so we have this complex system where through the water bond we are trying to incent what needs to be a much greater investment in a changing climate where everything fits together, where the public is trying to understand exactly what's going on, and over 90% of them thinks that their water source is their tap, and that not much happens before the water gets there. And so we know it's our job to get that money out the door, to try to work on public opinion, to try to make basic infrastructure investments for the long term, and try to invest in the public the notion that the climate is changing, and we don't fully know yet the impacts, and we don't fully know what precipitation patterns will be in 50 or 75 years, how they might change in microclimates in different ways in California, but they are in fact changing. And we do have to move with the changes, and we do have to upgrade our system in general, but probably over time look at the different ways to deal with the changes in a system that was designed in the climate that is passing. Those are the overview comments I would make to start, and I wish you could rescue me from my finance appeals meeting at 4 o'clock, but I will be here until then to answer whatever questions you have with the other panelists.
Thank you, Secretary Laird. Director Cowan.
Thank you, Chair Gordon. Let me just note right off the bat that I don't have a PhD either, but I've got about 35 years in the hard knock school of California water planning and policy, and I'm going to get it right one of these years, I guess, if I keep trying. Anyway, let me first of all just endorse the comments I heard from previous testimony from the PhDs that were in the room. I think what they described to you is very consistent with the way we see the water picture and the effects of global climate change on our system. at the Department of Water Resources. Let me just say that, of course, the California Water Action Plan is our playbook within the Brown administration for how we expect to use that above the all of the above strategy to deal with these big issues we've got before us today. If you want to take a deeper dive into any of the specific regional issues or some of the pros and cons or issues facing any of the various water strategies that we have before us, I would recommend the California Water Plan, which of course is the Department of Water Resources statutory responsibility to update every 5 years, and we did so in 2013. And in that series of volumes, you can get at some of the regional pictures around California, what specifically, what kind of issues they're facing and what their opportunities might look like, as well as a deep dive on over 30 different resource management strategies, some of the benefits, the costs, and impediments to moving forward on each of those strategies. Just a few comments on some of the things that Secretary Laird already commented on. I think one of the best kept secrets in California water has been the success that we have had over the past decade or longer in promoting and implementing integrated regional water management. As Secretary Laird points out, most on-the-ground water solutions take place at the local level. We have found great success in using bond funding provided by California's voters to facilitate better conversations among the local agencies to come up with those regional solutions, to get past the decentralization that you and previous panelists spoke to. If you're going to implement a lot of these solutions, it requires a watershed approach because of the decentralization and the just the border issues we have in various water authorities. An integrated regional water management approach is our best solution for overcoming those kinds of issues and getting at watershed-based solutions. Since passage of Proposition 50, going back a few years, the Department of Water Resources has awarded over $800 million now in IRWM grant funds. That's leveraged about $3 billion of local investment in more than 580 locally prioritized projects, and we estimate that altogether between the supply enhancement and the demand reduction, that amounts to about 3 million acre-feet per year, so that's significant in the California water picture. We expect to allocate the remainder of the Prop 84 funds by the end of 2015, about $231 million on the table, and of course we've got the Prop 1 dollars to look forward to. I'm often in the position of defending moving slow and steady in getting that money out the door as opposed to rushing to get to the best investment possible today. What we found is that continued investment provides the best incentive for local agencies to continue that work and coming up with regional solutions and raising the local money necessary to get to the total investment we're looking for. So it's always a balance between trying to make as much impact as we can with the dollars made available to us and stressing for those longer term goals of continued cooperation and investment by local agencies. I won't give you all of these statistics, but aside from that broader pot of IRWM money, of course, we administer grants for stormwater management, for water conservation specifically, and just during this drought, of course, special funding for turf and toilet rebate programs, as well as desal grants. So we've got a lot of money in play. Again, I think our role is really to try to incentivize that local planning and local investment as best we can with the dollars that the legislature and the California voters make available to the department. Just a couple of other issues. First of all, there was some discussion earlier about the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. I do believe that this is probably the biggest game changer in California water in our generation. Not that the act itself, of course, is going to produce new water supplies, but it's about sustaining groundwater as the important resource that it is in California today. And perhaps even more importantly, I believe as this local developed, sustainable groundwater management plans are developed and implemented, it will lead to a much more realistic discussion about the entire water systems necessary to not only sustain groundwater, but to provide the level of water supply reliability that every region is looking for. So instead of just overdrafting your groundwater basin, you're going to have to speak to what sort of investments are necessary to continue the type of water supply reliability that we're looking for. So we're off to a good start, I believe, about a year in now to implementation of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. We've recently completed regulations on setting up the boundaries, and we'll have more process next year on developing the actual rules for the contents of the plans between the Department of Water Resources and the California Water Commission. So a lot of good work going on there, a lot more work to do. Of course, we're very concerned about the near-term effects of overdraft due to 4 years of drought now, and the particularly the subsidence that has resulted from that significant overdraft, and are working hard to have good conversations with local governments on what they might do through ordinances and other actions to get a handle on that near-term subsidence issue. We also have some funds available through Proposition 1 to get out to counties that are dealing with stressed groundwater basins to help them develop those ordinances and protect basins that are at risk. Another big initiative, of course, through Proposition 1 is the storage provisions provided in Proposition 1 empowers the California Water Commission, of course, to develop more specific regulations, rules of the road for how California will make an investment in increased storage over time. I think that's a very important initiative moving forward, and one that the Department of Water Resources intends to help the Water Commission with. These are locally developed proposals that will seek the state as a partner, if you will, to develop storage projects. I believe the department's role in those activities is really trying to figure out how local storage projects can work within the broader system, how we can integrate them into the state or federal water systems in order to increase the benefits that they might provide. Finally, Secretary Laird mentioned the Delta issues, of course. California Water Fix is a significant initiative for the Department of Water Resources right now. It's about modernizing the state and federal water projects to make them more sustainable, as much as improving the operations of the state and federal systems. However, improving Delta conveyance is important for facilitating success in any number of other initiatives: better groundwater conjunctive use, better water marketing, and a number of other activities. So it's one of those connecting sort of initiatives that helps many other initiatives work better. So I think I'll stop there and turn it over to our colleague from the State Board.
Thank you, Director Cowan. And finally, Mr. Bishop with the State Water Resources Control Board.